Please, just hold him for 1 minute, because I think my son has forgotten what comfort feels like. At 2:43 in the morning, on the top floor of Whitmore Children's Medical Center in Manhattan, Ethan Whitmore said those words like they cost him more than every company he owned. The hallway outside the private infant care suite was washed in pale blue emergency light, the kind that made every face look tired and every shadow look deeper. Nurses moved quickly but quietly, their sneakers whispering over the polished floor. A monitor beeped behind the glass wall, steady but sharp, while the thin, exhausted cry of a baby cut through the silence again and again. Oliver Whitmore was only 4 months old, small enough to fit against one arm, wrapped in a white blanket with tiny silver stars, but his cries had defeated a room full of specialists, consultants, private caregivers, and expensive machines. No one could calm him. No one could get him to take more than half an ounce from a bottle. No one could keep his tiny hands from curling into fists as if the whole world had already disappointed him. And in the middle of that room stood Ethan Whitmore, the Alpha CEO whose name appeared on hospital wings, charity boards, business magazines, and buildings across the city, looking nothing like the man on those glossy covers. His black suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was wrinkled at the sleeves. His tie hung loose around his neck like something he had forgotten how to remove. His dark blonde hair, usually neat and controlled, had fallen across his forehead. His gray eyes were red at the edges, not from anger, but from too many nights without sleep. He held his son with both hands, carefully, almost fearfully, as if Oliver were made of glass and one wrong breath might break him. Across the room, the senior nurse lowered her voice and said they had tried everyone. The neonatal specialist had tried. The lactation consultant had tried. The pediatric nutritionist had tried. 3 professional infant caregivers had come and gone in less than 6 hours. Even the most highly recommended Omega nanny in New York had stepped out after Oliver screamed until his little voice cracked. Ethan listened without blinking, his jaw tight, his alpha presence filling the room with cedarwood, black coffee, and cold winter smoke, but power meant nothing here. Money meant nothing. A last name carved into marble meant nothing. His son was still crying. Then, from the open doorway, came a sound so soft that at first no one noticed it. A low, gentle humming, almost hidden beneath the machines. Noah Bennett had only meant to pass by with a tray of sanitized bottles. He was the overnight assistant most families never noticed, the chubby Omega in pale blue scrubs who restocked blankets, warmed formula, folded tiny clothes, and smiled even when other staff members spoke over him. His cheeks were round, his arms soft, his body nothing like the sleek, elegant Omegas wealthy alpha families usually requested, and he had learned to move quietly through rooms where people assumed softness meant weakness. But the moment his humming reached the glass-walled suite, Oliver's crying broke. Not slowly. Not gradually. It stopped as if someone had turned a key inside the night. The room froze. Noah froze too, one hand still around the bottle tray, his brown eyes wide with alarm. Ethan turned toward him with the sudden focus of a drowning man seeing shore. For one long second, the alpha only stared. Then Oliver whimpered again, small and tired, reaching one trembling hand toward the doorway. Ethan crossed the room in 3 desperate steps, not commanding, not demanding, only pleading with a rawness that stripped every layer of pride from his voice. "Can you nurse him just for once?" Noah's breath caught. The word struck him with confusion, then understanding, because Ethan was not asking for anything improper. He was asking him to care for the baby, to hold him, soothe him, help him take the warmed bottle, do the one simple thing no expert in the building had managed to do. Every eye turned to Noah, and heat rose to his face. He was not one of the private caregivers. He was not polished or expensive. He was not the kind of Omega men like Ethan Whitmore usually even saw. But Oliver reached again, his tiny fingers opening and closing in the air, and Noah set the tray down with shaking hands. "I can try," he whispered. Ethan stepped closer and placed the baby into Noah's arms. Their hands brushed for half a second, and Ethan went completely still, his breath catching as Noah's warm scent of vanilla milk, clean cotton, and soft rain rose between them. Oliver sighed. His little body melted against Noah's chest, his cheek pressing into the soft fabric of Noah's scrubs, and for the first time that night, the baby stopped fighting the world. Noah rocked him once, barely more than a sway, and whispered, "Hey, sweetheart. There you are." The monitor kept beeping. The rain tapped against the high windows. Ethan Whitmore stood motionless, staring at the chubby Omega he had never noticed before, as if Noah had just performed a miracle no amount of money could buy. Noah Bennett had spent most of his life being noticed for the wrong reasons, so when the entire private infant suite went silent around him, his first instinct was not pride. It was panic. He could feel every stare pressing into his back as he settled carefully into the padded rocking chair beside Oliver's crib, the warm bottle resting against the inside of his wrist to test the temperature one last time. The milk was just right, not too hot, not too cool, the way his grandmother had taught him years ago when she said babies trusted gentleness before they trusted words. Oliver made a tiny sound against his chest, more breath than cry, and Noah lowered his voice until it was barely above a whisper. "That is it, little man. No one is rushing you." He angled the bottle slowly, letting the baby choose instead of forcing him, and after a few trembling seconds, Oliver latched onto the nipple and began to drink. Half an ounce became 1. 1 became 2. Behind him, someone gasped softly, but Noah did not look up. He knew what happened when people remembered he was there. They judged the curve of his stomach beneath his scrubs, the softness of his arms, the roundness of his face, the way his body seemed built for comfort instead of display. At Lunicare, before Whitmore transferred Oliver here for emergency observation, Noah had heard every version of the same insult wrapped in politeness. He was sweet, but not elegant. Reliable, but not impressive. Good with babies, but not suitable for high-profile families. One supervisor had once suggested he work in laundry instead of family care because wealthy clients expected a certain image from an Omega. Noah had smiled, nodded, and gone home that morning to a studio apartment in Queens where the radiator knocked all night and unpaid nursing school brochures sat beneath a stack of overdue bills. He had once wanted to become a neonatal nurse, not just an assistant who cleaned bottles and folded blankets, but his mother's medical expenses had swallowed the future whole. So he worked nights, slept in pieces, took the bus across boroughs before sunrise, and told himself that being useful was enough. But now Ethan Whitmore was standing 6 feet away, watching him as if the entire room had shifted its center of gravity. The alpha had not spoken since Oliver began drinking. His broad shoulders remained rigid, his hands hanging empty at his sides, as if he did not know what to do without the crying baby in them. Noah finally glanced up and found Ethan's gray eyes fixed on Oliver's tiny hand, which had curled into the front of Noah's scrub top with complete trust. Something painful moved across Ethan's face. Not jealousy. Not suspicion. Grief, maybe, or the shock of realizing his son had been asking for something no one had understood. "How are you doing that?" Ethan asked, his voice low and rough. Noah looked back down at the baby. "I am not doing anything special. Everyone says that when they are doing something no one else can do." The words were quiet, but they landed heavily. Noah swallowed, and used a phrase that did not sound like a favor. "Babies know when people are scared of them," he said. "Sometimes adults hold them like problems. They can feel that." Ethan's jaw tightened. For a moment, Noah feared he had gone too far, but the alpha only looked at his son with a weariness so human it softened the sharp edges of him. "I am scared of him," Ethan admitted. "Not because I do not want him. Because I do. More than anything. And every time I touch him, I am afraid I will fail him." The room seemed to exhale. Noah looked at the billionaire alpha, the man whose name was carved on the building, and saw no marble, no money, no polished magazine cover. He saw a father who had mistaken control for love because control was the only language he had ever been taught. Oliver drank another half-ounce, then released the bottle with a sleepy sigh. Noah lifted him against his shoulder and patted his back in a slow rhythm, humming the same soft tune from the hallway. Ethan took one step closer before stopping himself, as though he needed permission to enter the warmth gathering around them. Noah noticed. Without thinking too much, he said, "You can sit down, Mr. Whitmore. He should hear your voice too." Ethan stared at the chair beside him like it was a challenge more difficult than any boardroom battle, but then he sat. Carefully. Silently. The cedarwood and winter smoke of his scent no longer felt overwhelming. It folded into the softer air around Noah, uneasy but calmer. Oliver burped, a tiny sound that made one of the nurses cover her mouth in relief, and Noah smiled before he could stop himself. Ethan saw it. For the first time that night, something in his expression changed. Not a smile, not yet, but the beginning of one, fragile and unfamiliar. Then Oliver turned his head toward Ethan's voice, his small fingers still gripping Noah's scrubs, and Ethan whispered, almost in disbelief, "Hello, my son." The baby did not cry. He only blinked slowly, safe between them, while Noah realized with a quiet, frightening certainty that this night was no longer just another shift. By 3:18 in the morning, the miracle had become a problem, because Oliver Whitmore had fallen asleep in Noah Bennett's arms and refused to be moved anywhere else. The first attempt was gentle. A senior nurse warmed the crib mattress, dimmed the overhead lights, and guided Noah's elbow as he leaned forward with the sleeping baby tucked carefully against his shoulder. Oliver's lashes rested against his cheeks, his little mouth soft and open, his breathing finally slow after hours of distress. For one perfect second, everyone believed the crisis had passed. Then Noah lowered him half an inch toward the crib, and Oliver's tiny hand tightened in his scrub top. His face wrinkled. His breath hitched. The monitor gave a sharper beep. Ethan stepped forward immediately, every muscle in his body going tense, but Noah lifted Oliver back before the cry could fully form. The baby settled at once, turning his cheek into the warmth of Noah's chest with a sigh so small it almost broke the room. No one spoke. The message was clear enough. Oliver was not ready to let go. The pediatric specialist, Dr. Maren Lowe, reviewed the chart on her tablet with a frown that deepened by the second. She was a composed beta woman in her 50s with silver-framed glasses and the calm authority of someone who had spent 3 decades around fragile infants and frightened parents. "His temperature has come down," she said carefully, "and his oxygen levels are stable." "That is good. But he is still exhausted, underfed, and overstimulated. We need several uninterrupted hours of calm." Ethan looked from the doctor to Noah. "Then he stays here." "Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Lowe said, keeping her voice professional, "the issue is not the room. The issue is the person keeping him regulated." Every eye shifted again to Noah, and his stomach tightened. He was suddenly too aware of himself, the inexpensive sneakers, the faded badge clipped to his pocket, the soft roll of his belly when he leaned back in the rocking chair, the fact that he smelled faintly of baby soap and vending machine coffee after a 10-hour shift. He had never been the person wealthy families asked for. He was the person they thanked without looking up. Ethan understood before Noah did. "You want him to stay with Oliver." Dr. Lowe closed the tablet. "For tonight, yes. I would recommend continuous observation in a quiet environment. However, this floor is overstaffed with people who make the baby anxious and understaffed with people who calm him. If Mr. Bennett is willing, Oliver may do better in his home nursery with medical monitoring brought in." Noah blinked. "His home nursery?" Ethan turned to him, and for the first time since they had met, the alpha looked uncertain in a way that was almost humble. "My penthouse is 10 minutes away by car. There is a full medical suite for Oliver, and Dr. Lowe can send a private nurse and portable monitors. You would not be alone. You would be paid for your time, of course. More than fairly." The mention of money should have made the decision easier. Noah thought of his mother's prescription bill folded in his wallet, the nursing school envelope on his kitchen table, the rent notice taped beside his refrigerator. But another thought came faster. A penthouse. Ethan Whitmore's private home. A world where people wore watches worth more than Noah's yearly salary and looked at bodies like his as if comfort were something embarrassing. "I am not one of your private caregivers," Noah said softly. Ethan's answer came without hesitation. "I know. That should have ended it, but Ethan looked down at Oliver and his voice changed. I am not asking because you are on a list. I am asking because my son finally looks peaceful, and I do not know how to give him that without you. Noah felt something in his chest loosen and ache at the same time. Oliver shifted, his tiny fingers brushing Noah's collar, trusting him with the full weight of his sleep. Around them, the hospital lights glowed like a false dawn. Noah had spent years being told he was too soft, too plain, too much, and not enough all at once. Yet this baby had chosen his arms out of an entire room. Slowly, Noah nodded. All right. For tonight. Ethan exhaled like he had been holding his breath for hours. 10 minutes later, Noah stepped out of the hospital through a private side entrance with Oliver asleep against him, wrapped in a heated blanket, while rain streaked the black windows of the waiting SUV. Ethan opened the door himself, shielding both Noah and the baby from the cold spring wind. As Noah climbed inside, he caught sight of his reflection in the dark glass, round-faced, tired-eyed, still in wrinkled scrubs, holding the heir to one of the richest families in New York. Beside him, Ethan Whitmore took his seat, not too close, not too far, his gaze never leaving his son. The city blurred past in silver and blue, and Noah realized that the life he had known was being carried away behind him, one rain-soaked block at a time. The Whitmore penthouse did not feel like a home when Noah first stepped inside. It felt like the top floor of a museum that no one was allowed to touch. The private elevator opened into a vast space of white marble, black steel, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked down on Manhattan from so high above the street that the yellow taxis seemed like scattered sparks beneath the rain. Everything was polished, expensive, and perfectly still. There were no shoes by the door, no half-finished coffee cups, no blanket thrown over the couch, no sign that a baby lived there except for the discreet medical equipment waiting near the hallway like silent witnesses. Noah held Oliver closer without meaning to. The little boy stirred, his cheek warm against Noah's shoulder, then settled again when Noah began to hum under his breath. Ethan noticed. He had noticed everything since the hospital, every shift in Oliver's breathing, every twitch of his tiny fingers, every time Noah adjusted the blanket before the baby could fuss. But here, inside his own home, Ethan seemed almost more uncomfortable than Noah. He removed his wet coat and handed it to a silent housekeeper who appeared from nowhere, then paused as if uncertain what a father was supposed to do next. The nursery is this way, he said. His voice was quiet, but it echoed in the open space. Noah followed him down a hallway lined with abstract paintings and closed doors until they reached a room at the far end. The nursery was enormous. Soft gray walls, custom white furniture, a crib that looked hand-carved, shelves filled with toys still arranged by size and color, and a rocking chair that probably cost more than Noah's first car. It was beautiful in the way a store display was beautiful, flawless and untouched. Noah looked around and felt a sadness he could not immediately name. Where are his pictures? He asked. Ethan glanced at him. His pictures? Family pictures. Messy ones. Hospital bracelet. First blanket. A stuffed animal somebody actually picked because it made them smile, not because it matched the curtains. Ethan did not answer. That silence told Noah more than any explanation could have. A private nurse arrived with Dr. Lowe's monitoring equipment, setting everything up near the crib with efficient calm. Oliver remained asleep through it all, but only as long as Noah stayed close. The moment Noah shifted his weight toward the crib, the baby's face tightened again. Noah stopped and sighed gently. Okay, sweetheart. We are not rushing. Ethan stood near the doorway, watching like a man locked outside his own life. Noah saw the tension in his hands, the way his fingers curled and released at his sides. He was a CEO who knew how to acquire companies, silence rooms, and command armies of employees before breakfast, but he did not know where to stand in his own son's nursery. Mr. Whitmore, Noah said, keeping his voice soft, take off your tie. Ethan blinked. What? Your tie. And your shoes, if you are comfortable. Babies do not care how powerful you look. They care if you feel safe. The private nurse looked down quickly, hiding a smile. Ethan stared at Noah for a long moment, and Noah braced himself for offense, for the cold reminder that employees did not give instructions to billionaires. Instead, Ethan reached up and loosened the knot. He pulled the tie free, folded it once, and set it on the dresser. Then he removed his shoes. The change was small, almost ordinary, but it shifted something in the room. Noah sat in the rocking chair with Oliver and nodded toward the padded rug. "Sit there." Ethan looked at the floor as if no one had asked him to sit on one in his entire adult life. Still, he did it. Carefully, awkwardly, in his wrinkled dress shirt and socks, Ethan Whitmore lowered himself onto the nursery rug. Noah adjusted Oliver in his arms and whispered, "Now talk to him." Ethan's throat moved. "What do I say?" "Anything true." The rain whispered against the windows. The monitor pulsed steadily beside them. Ethan looked at his sleeping son, and the hard lines of his face slowly gave way to something unguarded. "I bought you this whole room before you were born," he said, his voice low. "I thought if everything was perfect, I would be ready. I thought your life could be safe if I controlled enough of it." Oliver's tiny fingers flexed against Noah's sleeve. Ethan leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, looking younger in the dim honey-colored light. "But the first time you cried, I realized I had no idea how to be what you needed." Noah felt his own eyes sting, but he kept rocking, slow and steady. "That is a start," he said. Ethan looked up at him then, not at Oliver, but at Noah, and there was no dismissal in his gaze, no judgment, no surprise at the softness of Noah's body or the worn edges of his scrubs. Only attention. Deep, unsettling attention. "Do people always make you feel small?" he asked. Noah's fingers tightened lightly around the blanket. For a second, he heard every old comment in his mind, every polite rejection, every laugh disguised as advice. Then Oliver sighed in his sleep, safe and warm against him. Noah looked down and smiled a little. "Only when I forget that I am not." The words settled between them like a quiet promise. Ethan did not respond immediately. He only nodded, as if Noah had given him something more valuable than an answer. Then, from the hallway outside the nursery, a woman's sharp voice broke the fragile peace. "Ethan, tell me the rumors are wrong." Noah turned his head as a tall, silver-haired woman stepped into the doorway wearing a cream coat and an expression colder than the rain outside. Her eyes moved from Ethan on the floor to Noah in the rocking chair, then to Oliver sleeping against Noah's chest. Her mouth tightened with immediate disapproval. Ethan rose slowly, all softness leaving his posture. "Mother," he said. "Not now." But the woman was already staring at Noah as if he were a stain on the perfect room. "You brought an unknown Omega into this house in the middle of the night," she said. "And you put my grandson in his arms?" Oliver stirred at the sound of her voice. Noah instinctively lowered his cheek closer to the baby's hair and hummed once, soft and steady. Oliver settled again. Ethan saw it. His mother saw it too. For the first time since Noah entered the penthouse, the room did not feel cold. It felt like a line had been drawn, and Ethan Whitmore had finally chosen which side of it he was standing on. Mrs. Whitmore did not raise her voice, but the nursery seemed to shrink around every word she spoke. She stood in the doorway with perfect posture, pearl earrings shining beneath the soft lamplight, her silver hair swept into an elegant twist that did not have a single strand out of place. She looked like the kind of woman who had never entered a room without owning it, yet Oliver's tiny body had stiffened at the sound of her voice, and Noah felt the change immediately. The baby's fingers clenched in his scrub top. His peaceful breathing grew uneven. Noah lowered his voice and hummed the same simple melody, rocking once, then twice, keeping his attention on Oliver instead of the woman who was studying him as if he had been carried in with the rain. "Ethan," Mrs. Whitmore said, her eyes never leaving Noah, "this is not acceptable." Ethan stepped between her and the rocking chair. He had put aside his jacket, his tie, and the polished armor of his public life, but something colder and stronger moved into his posture now. "Oliver is sleeping," he said. "Lower your voice." Her eyebrows lifted, not with shock, but with offense. "Do not speak to me as if I am one of your employees." Then do not walk into my son's room as if he is a board meeting. The private nurse went very still near the monitor. Noah looked down quickly, pretending not to hear, though every word vibrated through the room. Mrs. Whitmore's gaze sharpened. I came because half the city is already whispering that you removed Oliver from the hospital with some overnight assistant nobody can verify. Noah felt his face warm, but he kept rocking. He had been called worse than unknown. Too soft. Too plain. Too heavy. Too ordinary for delicate families and important rooms. Still, hearing himself reduced to a risk while holding a child who had finally stopped crying made something quiet inside him ache. Ethan's voice dropped. His name is Noah Bennett. Mrs. Whitmore gave a faint, humorless smile. And what exactly is Mr. Bennett qualified to do? Noah opened his mouth, then closed it. He did not trust himself to answer without shaking. But before Ethan could speak, Oliver made a small distressed sound. It was not a cry yet, just the edge of one, but Noah responded instantly. He shifted the baby upright, checked the blanket near his chin, and whispered, I know, sweetheart. Too many sharp sounds. You are okay. The baby settled again. The monitor steadied. Mrs. Whitmore saw it happen, and for a second her expression flickered. Not warmth. Calculation. Coincidence, she said. Ethan turned his head slowly. It has happened 4 times tonight. Then hire him for the week and run a background check. Do not allow sentiment to cloud your judgment. The word sentiment landed like an accusation. Noah remembered his supervisor at Luna Care saying something similar whenever he spent too long comforting a crying infant. Do not get attached. Do not confuse care with importance. Do not imagine you belong. Ethan moved closer to the rocking chair, not touching Noah, but standing near enough that his cedarwood and winter smoke scent formed a quiet wall between Noah and the doorway. My judgment is the only reason Oliver is asleep. Mrs. Whitmore's mouth tightened. Your judgment gave that child a nursery without a mother. The room went silent in a way that felt different from peace. Ethan's face changed, the color draining from beneath his skin. Noah felt the wound in that sentence even though it had not been aimed at him. Oliver stirred again, sensing the tension like weather. This time, Noah did not just hum. He spoke, softly but clearly. With respect, Mrs. Whitmore, he does not need perfect people tonight. He needs calm people. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes snapped to him. Excuse me? Noah's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his wrists, but Oliver was warm and trusting in his arms, and that gave him courage he did not usually have. Your grandson reacts to stress. He reacts to raised voices, strong scents, and people touching him like he is a problem to solve. I am not saying that to criticize anyone. I am saying it because he is telling us the only way he can. Ethan looked at Noah as if each word was opening a door he had not known was locked. The private nurse nodded once from beside the monitor. Mrs. Whitmore inhaled sharply, then smoothed the front of her cream coat. You speak boldly for someone in borrowed authority. Noah swallowed. I am not borrowing authority. I am holding a baby. For the first time Ethan smiled. It was small and brief, but real enough to soften the room. Mrs. Whitmore saw that too, and it angered her more than any argument could have. This family has protocols, she said. Oliver has had every protocol money can buy, Ethan answered. Tonight, he has Noah. The baby sighed, as if agreeing in his sleep, and tucked his cheek deeper into Noah's chest. Mrs. Whitmore stared at them for one long, cold moment before turning away. You will regret letting emotion make decisions for the Whitmore name. Her heels clicked down the hallway until the sound disappeared into the penthouse. Only then did Noah realize he had been holding his breath. Ethan looked at him, the hard alpha edge fading into something quieter. I am sorry, he said. Noah shook his head, though his hands were still trembling. People like her do not scare me as much as babies who cannot tell anyone what hurts. Ethan's gaze lowered to Oliver, then returned to Noah with a depth that made the air feel suddenly still. Then help me learn how to listen. Outside, the rain began to ease against the windows, and inside the perfect, empty nursery, Noah Bennett became the first person Ethan Whitmore had ever asked to teach him something that money could not buy. By the time the rain stopped, the penthouse had learned a new kind of silence. Not the cold, polished silence Noah had felt when he first arrived, but a softer one, woven from the steady rhythm of Oliver's breathing, the low hum of the monitor, and Ethan Whitmore sitting cross-legged on the nursery rug with his sleeves rolled to his elbows, trying to learn how to warm a bottle without treating it like a business problem. Noah watched him check the temperature against his wrist for the third time, his face serious enough for a corporate merger, and had to bite back a smile. "You do not have to look like the bottle is about to argue with you," Noah said. Ethan glanced up, caught between embarrassment and focus. "I have negotiated with senators who were easier to understand than this. The bottle is honest. That makes it less dangerous." For 1 second, Ethan looked startled. Then a quiet laugh left him, low and brief, as if his body had forgotten how to make the sound and was testing it carefully. Oliver stirred in Noah's arms but did not wake. The private nurse, satisfied that the baby's numbers were stable, had stepped into the hall to make a call to Dr. Lowe, leaving the nursery wrapped in warm lamplight. Noah had moved from the rocking chair to the thick rug, a pillow behind his back, Oliver curled against him in a fresh sleeper covered with tiny blue whales. Ethan had changed too, not into luxury pajamas or another perfect outfit, but into a plain dark t-shirt and sweatpants someone must have brought from another room. Without the suit, he looked less like an untouchable alpha CEO and more like a tired father who had been awake too long and loved too deeply without knowing where to put it. "Try holding him now," Noah said. Ethan's expression tightened immediately. "He is sleeping." "Yes. That is why it is a good time." "What if I wake him?" "Then we calm him again." "What if I cannot?" Noah softened his voice. "Then I help you." Ethan looked at him, and the air changed in a way Noah did not know how to name. There was no command in Ethan's eyes now, no expectation that the world would rearrange itself for him. There was only trust, fragile and reluctant, being placed in Noah's hands the way Oliver had been. Carefully, Noah shifted the baby toward him. Ethan held out his arms too stiffly at first, elbows awkward, shoulders tense, like he expected the infant to break apart from the slightest mistake. "Relax your chest," Noah murmured. "He is not a contract. You do not have to hold all the terms at once." Ethan breathed in slowly, then lowered his shoulders. Noah guided one of his hands beneath Oliver's back and the other beneath his bottom, adjusting the angle until the baby rested securely against him. Oliver frowned in his sleep. Ethan froze. "Keep breathing," Noah whispered. "He can feel when you disappear into fear." Ethan swallowed and looked down. "Hello, my brave boy," he said, the words rough but real. Oliver's tiny face smoothed. His hand opened against Ethan's shirt, no longer searching, no longer pushing away. Ethan stared at that little hand as if it had granted him a pardon. The sight made Noah's chest ache. This was what the penthouse had been missing, not more equipment, not better furniture, not experts with perfect resumes. It had been missing permission to be imperfect. For nearly 20 minutes, Ethan held his son while Noah sat beside him, close enough to help but far enough to let the moment belong to them. When Oliver made a restless sound, Ethan looked to Noah in alarm, but Noah only nodded toward the bottle. "Offer it slowly." Ethan did. His hand shook once, then steadied. Oliver accepted the bottle and drank half an ounce without crying. Ethan's eyes went glassy, though no tears fell. "He never does this with me," he whispered. "He is doing it now." Ethan turned his face slightly away, but Noah had already seen the emotion he was trying to hide. Outside the nursery, the city began to brighten from black to charcoal gray. Dawn was coming, though the room still felt suspended in its own private hour. Noah's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he checked it with one hand, careful not to startle Oliver. A message from his supervisor appeared on the cracked screen. "Do not forget you are still hourly staff. Return the Whitmore access badge before leaving." Noah stared at the words, the old familiar shrinking feeling pressing at his ribs. Ethan noticed. Bad news? Noah locked the phone. Just a reminder of where I stand. Ethan's gaze sharpened, but before he could ask more, the private nurse returned with Dr. Lowe on speaker. The doctor's calm voice filled the room. Oliver's latest readings are encouraging. Whatever changed tonight, it is working. I recommend maintaining the same care environment for the next 72 hours. Noah's heart stumbled. 72 hours? Ethan looked from the phone to Noah, then down at Oliver sleeping safely in his arms. For the first time all night, his decision did not look desperate. It looked clear. Then Noah stays, he said. Noah opened his mouth, but Ethan continued, his voice steady. Not as hourly staff. Not as a temporary accident. As Oliver's personal caregiver, with full authority over his comfort routine. Noah felt the room tilt. No one had ever given him authority over anything more important than a supply closet. Mr. Whitmore, I do not think your family will like that. Ethan looked toward the hallway where his mother had disappeared, then back at the baby in his arms. My family has had enough influence over this house. Oliver sighed against him, peaceful and warm, and Ethan's voice softened. Now my son gets what he needs. Noah looked at the alpha, at the child, at the first thin line of morning appearing beyond the windows, and understood that the night had not ended. It had opened a door, and once he stepped through it, there might be no returning to the invisible life he had known before. For the first time since Oliver was born, morning entered the Whitmore penthouse without sounding like an alarm. It came quietly through the glass walls, turning the rain-washed city gold and silver while Noah Bennett sat at the kitchen island with a mug of coffee he had not asked for and a blanket around his shoulders that Ethan had placed there without making a speech about it. Oliver slept nearby in a portable bassinet, one tiny fist tucked beside his cheek, the monitor beside him showing steady numbers that made the private nurse smile every time she passed. The penthouse staff moved differently now. They still whispered, still watched, but there was less judgment in their eyes and more confusion, as if the building itself could not understand how a chubby Omega in wrinkled scrubs had done what specialists, money, and strict schedules had failed to do. Noah should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt exposed. He had texted his supervisor that he would not be returning for the end of his shift because Dr. Lowe had requested him for Oliver's care, and the reply had been short enough to hurt. We will discuss your position later. Noah stared at those words until the screen went dark, pretending they did not matter. Ethan noticed anyway. He seemed to notice everything now, though he did not crowd Noah with questions. He simply set a plate in front of him with buttered toast, scrambled eggs, and sliced strawberries, then said, "You have been awake all night." Noah looked at the breakfast, startled by how ordinary it was. "So have you. I am used to ignoring basic human needs." "That is not the impressive statement you think it is." Ethan paused, then gave that quiet almost smile again, the one that made him look less like a man carved from winter and more like someone trying to remember sunlight. Noted. Noah picked up a strawberry and felt heat rise to his face when he realized Ethan was watching to make sure he ate. "You do not have to manage me too. I am not managing you. Mr. Whitmore." "Ethan," he corrected softly. Noah looked up. The name hung between them, simple and strangely intimate, though nothing improper passed through the air. Only the fragile warmth of two people too tired to pretend as well as they usually did. Before Noah could answer, Oliver made a small waking sound from the bassinet. Ethan moved first, then stopped, glancing at Noah for guidance. That small pause did something to Noah's heart. Last night, Ethan would have summoned someone. Now he waited to learn. Slowly, Noah said, "Let him hear you before you touch him." Ethan leaned over the bassinet. "Good morning, Oliver," he whispered, his deep voice gentled down until it barely stirred the air. "It is me." Oliver blinked up at him, unfocused and sleepy, then stretched one tiny leg. He did not cry. Ethan's face changed with such quiet wonder that Noah had to look away. The moment was too private, too beautiful, and somehow he had been invited into it. Then the private nurse returned with a folder in her hand, her expression no longer relaxed. "Mr. Whitmore, Dr. Lowe asked me to confirm something from Oliver's prior records." Ethan straightened. "What is it?" The nurse hesitated, glancing at Noah. "There are notes from 2 weeks ago stating that Oliver showed distress around Omega caregivers. That was why the household reduced Omega contact." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know. We were told he was reactive to Omega scent." Noah frowned. "That does not make sense." Both of them looked at him. Noah set down his mug, the old nursing student part of his mind waking beneath exhaustion. "He calms with my scent. He calmed before I even touched him. Babies can prefer certain people, but a true scent sensitivity would not reverse this strongly without a reason." The nurse opened the folder. Dr. Lowe had the same concern. She found a medication log from the previous caregiver. Ethan reached for the papers. "What medication?" Noah saw the answer before Ethan spoke it aloud. The brand name was printed beside several dates, described as a soothing environmental supplement. But Noah had stocked enough nursery cabinets to recognize the smaller warning text beneath it. "That is not for infants," he said, his voice going cold in a way that surprised even him. "It is a pheromone enhancer used by adult caregivers. It makes an Omega scent stronger, sweeter, more noticeable." Ethan's expression hardened, but he did not raise his voice. "Why would anyone use that near my son?" The private nurse answered carefully. "Some elite caregivers use it to encourage bonding responses, but it can overwhelm sensitive infants." Noah looked at Oliver, who was now watching them from the bassinet with calm gray eyes. He was not rejecting Omegas, Noah said. He was rejecting being overwhelmed. The realization settled over the kitchen like a storm cloud. Ethan turned toward the hallway leading to the family wing, where his mother had gone hours earlier. His face was controlled, but his eyes had changed completely. "Who approved this?" The nurse swallowed. "According to the records, the previous caregiver was hired through the Whitmore family office." Noah understood the shape of it then. The cold nursery. The perfect furniture. The protocols. The way Mrs. Whitmore had looked at him not as a person, but as a disruption. Someone had decided Oliver needed to fit a system, and when he could not, they had blamed the baby. Ethan picked up his phone, but before he could make a call, Noah stood. "Wait." Ethan looked at him. "This involves my son." "Yes," Noah said gently. "And he is awake. If you walk into this angry, he will feel it." Ethan looked down. Oliver's lower lip had begun to tremble, not from pain, but from the rising tension in the room. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second, then put the phone down. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. "Tell me what to do first." Noah stepped beside him, close enough for their shoulders to almost touch, and nodded toward the bassinet. "Pick him up. Not as proof. Not as an heir. As your son." Ethan obeyed. Oliver settled against him with only a small sound, and Noah placed one steadying hand near the baby's back, careful not to touch Ethan more than necessary. The sunrise filled the room, warm and gold, while the truth sat open on the kitchen island in a folder of printed records. Ethan looked at Noah over his son's head, and for the first time, the alpha's trust did not feel desperate. It felt chosen. "After he eats," Ethan said softly, "we find out who hurt his peace." Noah nodded, but his eyes stayed on Oliver. The baby was calm now, one hand resting against Ethan's shirt, the other reaching blindly until his tiny fingers found Noah's sleeve. And just like that, the three of them stood connected in the morning light, while somewhere inside the perfect Whitmore empire, a secret began to crack. By mid-morning, the Whitmore penthouse no longer felt asleep. It felt like a house holding its breath. Ethan had moved the discussion out of the kitchen and into a glass-walled study just across from the nursery, close enough that Oliver could remain in view while the private nurse prepared his next bottle and Noah folded a clean blanket beside the bassinet. Every few seconds, Ethan looked through the open doorway to check on his son, and every time Oliver shifted, Noah looked too. They did it without planning, two separate instincts finding the same rhythm. On the desk between them lay the printed records, medication logs, caregiver schedules, and internal approvals from the Whitmore family office. Ethan did not pace. He did not shout. That somehow made his anger feel larger. He stood with one hand resting on the desk, reading each line with the cold precision that had made board members fear him for years, but Noah could see the difference now. This was not corporate anger. This was a father discovering that his child's pain had been organized into paperwork. The previous caregiver used the enhancer on 4 recorded visits, Ethan said. Each visit was followed by a medical note saying Oliver became distressed around Omega caregivers. Noah nodded slowly. And then everyone believed the wrong pattern. Not everyone. Ethan's eyes lifted to him. Someone built the pattern. The words settled heavily in the study. Noah looked toward the nursery, where Oliver's tiny hand had found the edge of his blanket. Maybe they thought they were helping, he said, though he did not fully believe it. Ethan's expression did not soften. My mother believes every problem can be corrected if the right person controls it. At that moment, as if summoned by the truth of her own name, Mrs. Whitmore entered the study without knocking. She had changed into a pale blue suit, flawless and calm, as though the night had not touched her. Behind her came a thin man in horn-rimmed glasses carrying a tablet. Your assistant said you cancelled the 10 o'clock call with London, she said. I told him you were unavailable for emotional reasons. Ethan closed the folder. I am unavailable because my son was given an adult pheromone enhancer under this family office's approval. The man behind her went pale. Mrs. Whitmore did not. She merely glanced at the papers, then at Noah, and her mouth tightened. That is an exaggerated interpretation. Noah's fingers stilled on the blanket. Ethan's voice remained low. Explain it. The caregiver was highly recommended. Oliver needed to bond with a proper Omega presence. His mother left instability behind her, and I was trying to prevent more of it. Ethan's hand curled against the desk, but he kept his voice controlled. You approved scent manipulation around a medically fragile infant. Do not use dramatic language with me. It was a common elite practice. It is not common in neonatal care, Noah said before he could stop himself. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes cut to him. The room chilled. I was not speaking to you. Noah felt the familiar instinct to shrink, to apologize, to remember his place. But through the glass wall, Oliver made a soft sound, and Noah saw his small face turn toward the study as if searching for the warm voice that had carried him through the night. That gave Noah strength. No, you were speaking about a baby like he was a public image problem. Mrs. Whitmore inhaled sharply. Ethan looked at Noah, not warning him to stop, not rescuing him, just standing beside him in the truth. Noah continued, his voice gentle but steady. Oliver does not need a proper Omega presence. He needs a calm one. He needs people who listen when his body says no. He needs care, not performance. For the first time, Mrs. Whitmore's perfect mask cracked, but not with regret. With irritation. You have been in this house for a few hours, Mr. Bennett. Do not mistake a temporary response for belonging. Ethan moved then, stepping fully between Noah and his mother. Enough. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a door closing. Noah belongs in any room where my son is safer because he is there. Mrs. Whitmore looked as if he had slapped the family name onto the floor. You would choose an overnight assistant over your own mother? Ethan looked through the glass at Oliver, then back at her. I am choosing my child over every system that failed him. Silence spread through the study. The thin man with the tablet lowered his eyes. Noah could barely breathe. He had imagined many things in rich houses: coldness, judgment, pity, maybe even temporary gratitude. He had not imagined being defended so plainly that his worth could not be mistaken for charity. Mrs. Whitmore's voice became soft, which somehow made it colder. You are making yourself vulnerable. Ethan's answer came at once. No. I am finally making this home safe. Oliver began to fuss then, a small rising sound from the nursery, and the argument lost all importance. Noah turned first, but Ethan was right beside him. They entered together. Noah checked the bottle, Ethan dimmed the lamp without being told, and when Oliver reached out, he reached for both of them. One little hand caught Ethan's finger. The other brushed Noah's sleeve. Mrs. Whitmore stood in the study doorway, watching the scene she could not control. Ethan lowered his voice and whispered to his son, "I hear you." Oliver settled. Noah looked up, and for a brief second, Ethan's eyes met his over the baby's crib. There was gratitude there, yes, but also something deeper, something steady and frighteningly tender. Not romance spoken too early, not a promise dressed up as pressure, but recognition. Noah Bennett, who had spent years believing he was useful only in the background, had become the center of the room without asking for it. And behind them, on the desk, the records remained open, proving that the real danger had never been Noah's softness. It had been a family that mistook control for love. 3 days later, the Whitmore penthouse had changed so quietly that Noah only noticed it when he stopped expecting the cold. A blue whale blanket now lived on the couch instead of being folded away. A half-empty bottle sat on the kitchen counter beside Ethan's untouched coffee. One of Oliver's tiny socks had disappeared beneath the grand piano, and Ethan, the man who once ran billion-dollar meetings with perfect precision, spent nearly 10 minutes on his hands and knees looking for it because Noah had mentioned that babies liked familiar textures. The nursery changed too. The gray walls were still there, the expensive crib still gleamed beneath the soft lamps, but now photographs lined the shelf, Oliver asleep on Ethan's chest after a morning feeding, Oliver gripping Noah's finger, Ethan sitting barefoot on the rug with a burp cloth over one shoulder and a look of stunned devotion on his face. The perfect room had finally learned how to be lived in. Dr. Lowe confirmed what Noah already knew before the test results arrived. Oliver was stronger. His feeding had improved. His sleep stretches had lengthened. His distress responses had faded once the enhancer products were removed from the home and every caregiver was retrained under Noah's routine. The previous private caregiver was dismissed, the family office was audited, and Ethan personally signed a new policy banning scent manipulation around infants in every Whitmore medical facility. Mrs. Whitmore did not apologize in a way that sounded warm, but she did appear one afternoon in the nursery doorway, quieter than before, and watched Oliver sleep peacefully in Ethan's arms. After a long silence, she looked at Noah and said, "You were correct." For her, it was almost surrender. Noah accepted it with a nod, not because he needed her approval, but because he no longer needed to fight for the right to stand where Oliver had already chosen him. At the end of the 72 hours, Noah packed the small canvas bag Ethan had sent someone to collect from his apartment in Queens. He folded his spare scrubs, tucked his nursing school brochure into the front pocket, and told himself not to be foolish. He had helped. He had mattered for a little while. But temporary miracles ended. People like him did not stay in penthouses with skyline views and family portraits waiting to be filled. He found Ethan in the nursery, standing beside the crib while Oliver waved both tiny fists at the mobile above him. Ethan turned when Noah entered, and something in his face tightened at the sight of the bag. "You are leaving." Noah tried to smile. "Dr. Lowe said he is stable. Your staff knows the routine now. You do not need me here every night." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he looked down at his son. "That is not true." Noah's breath caught. Ethan stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance, as if he understood that this choice had to be offered, not claimed. "I called your nursing program this morning," he said. Noah stared at him. "You did what?" "I asked whether a student could complete clinical hours while working under a pediatric private care contract. They said yes, with the proper supervision. Dr. Lowe agreed to sponsor you." Noah could not speak. The brochure in his bag suddenly felt heavier than all his old disappointments. Ethan continued, his voice steady but careful. "I am offering you the position of Oliver's lead caregiver. Full salary, health benefits for you and your mother, tuition support if you choose to return to school, and complete authority over his comfort plan. Noah's eyes burned. That sounds like charity. Ethan shook his head. No. Charity is what powerful people give to feel generous. This is employment, respect, and gratitude. You saved my son's peace, Noah. You also taught me how to be his father. Oliver babbled then, a soft, happy sound from the crib. Noah turned automatically, and Ethan lifted the baby into his arms. Oliver reached for Noah with both hands, impatient and certain. Noah stepped forward and let the baby grab his sleeve. Ethan's gaze softened. Stay because you want to. Leave if you need to. Either way, you will not go back to being invisible. Those words finally broke something open in Noah, not in pain, but in relief. He thought of his small apartment, his bills, the supervisor who had never seen his worth, the years he had spent making himself quiet so other people would feel comfortable overlooking him. Then he looked at Oliver, safe and smiling between them, and at Ethan, barefoot in the nursery he had once been afraid to enter. I will stay, Noah whispered. Ethan closed his eyes for one brief second, as if thanking a mercy he had no name for. Weeks became months, and the penthouse became a home. Noah returned to school part-time. Ethan learned lullabies badly, then better. Oliver grew round-cheeked and bright-eyed, laughing whenever Noah hummed and reaching for Ethan whenever he heard his father's voice. On the first warm evening of summer, they took Oliver to Central Park, where the grass smelled fresh after rain and the city softened around them in golden light. Ethan spread a blanket beneath an oak tree, Noah sat beside him with Oliver in his lap, and for once, no one looked misplaced. Ethan glanced at Noah, his expression quiet and certain. You once said people make you feel small only when you forget you are not. Noah smiled as Oliver curled against him, sleepy and content. I remember now. Ethan reached out, not to claim, not to command, but to rest his hand beside Noah's on the blanket, close enough to be a promise. And as the sun lowered behind the Manhattan skyline, Noah Bennett understood that he had not been brought into the Whitmore family because he was convenient, soft, or useful in a crisis. He had been seen. He had been chosen. And in the arms of a father learning gentleness and a baby who had known the truth before anyone else, he had finally found a place where comfort was not weakness, love was not control, and home was not something perfect. It was something warm enough to stay.